Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate Wool Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC, where our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guest may not represent those of the host of the station. Folks, it's still September as I am recording this show, and September is World Alzheimer's Awareness Month. A perfect time to have my exceptional guest with me today. I have with me very busy lady. I'm very happy that Dr. Deborah Greenhut is here with me. She is a phenomenal resource that I really want you to check out. Dr. Deborah Greenhut's website, which will be given. Dr. Greenhut was on back in the end of March, but the show was posted April 9th. So if you don't already subscribe to Chatting with Betsy, you need to do so you can hear my exceptional guest. And I'm on Speaker, Spotify, Apple, and Amazon Music, to name just a few. But let me tell you about Dr. Deborah Greenhut, best-selling author and writer of 2 books, The Hoarder's Wife, a novel, and the wonderful resource for caregivers. I love this book, The Rational Caregiver, How to Protect Your Life While Taking Care of Other People. Folks, that is a phenomenal resource, I'm telling you. Dr. Deborah Greenhut is also a keynote speaker, a lifelong caregiver educator. She was a family caregiver herself. She's been a podcast guest on many, many shows. She is a professional and executive life coach. She is founder of Creative Room for Learning. She has a marvelous YouTube video called Grief, The Unraveling, which I highly recommend. She's been listed in Who's Who America 24-25 for 50 years of service as an educator and author. She also has a subscription on Substack, which if you go to substack.com, you can look for Dr. Deborah Greenhut. And she was featured on Insight magazine recently. And Deborah has 2 new endeavors coming up that she's going to share with us. She has a new book that's going to be coming out very shortly, The Caregiver and the Crown, A Journey to Empowered Caregiving. Sounds very interesting. And a podcast, The Caregiving Secret, How to Survive Family Caregiving. Well, that I wish that was around 5-6 years ago. And I want to welcome Dr. Deborah Greenhut to Chatting with Betsy. Welcome,
Hi,
Deborah.
Betsy. Hi, Betsy. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are welcome. It is my pleasure. I'll tell you, Deborah, you know what? When I was starting out with caregiving, and I'm sure as you were, there wasn't information. There was nobody on the airwaves speaking about caregiving, how to survive, how to thrive. What do you do, and challenging behaviors. And I'm so glad that to see more people having shows about caregiving, sharing important, valuable knowledge and information. And my goodness, you are a wonderful resource. I can't wait to hear your show. What made you decide to start a podcast?
I wanted to reach as many people as possible, and I noticed that more and more people were turning to podcasts, and I listened to quite a few of them. So I thought, well, why not do an interview format where I can talk to other people about how they have solved their caregiving problems? So I am most interested in what I call sharegiving, which is the idea that it isn't just one person's responsibility, and there are many different ways to both get people to share, and if you're not a caregiver, to share a little of your time with someone who is. So I thought perhaps I could reach an additional group of people that I might not reach in a newsletter or in a book.
That is very, that's true. When I started with Jeannie White 6 years ago, because I was on Jeannie White's show, she's station manager, back in 2018, there wasn't many shows about caregiving. And it was very difficult at that time for caregivers to come on. They didn't want to come on. They could be anonymous. They didn't want to come on. They didn't want to share. And now the tide has changed. Finally, hallelujah. And I'm very happy to see that. I'm happy to see more people doing podcasts, more people sharing their journeys on social media, showing their loved one's journey. When I was doing it, that was the exception. There wasn't anyone showing their loved one's journey. That was like taboo back then, and I'm glad that is really changing a lot. So I wish you the best with that. Excuse me.
I was going to say, bless you. I think when I started doing caregiving, which was about 25 years ago, people didn't really want to disclose that there was an illness in their family or a condition that needed help. So the caregiving went on, certainly, and has for centuries, probably since there were civilizations. But people didn't want to expose their family condition. So there was a little bit of a bias against talking about it, and certainly not on the radio where everyone could hear you. And that has led to the isolation of caregivers, I think, more than anything, that it was awkward to come forward before. But now you'll hear a lot of people talking about it. I mean, as our generation ages, the baby boomer is my generation, certainly there's going to be greater need for caregivers. So if we don't talk about it, it's like so many things we didn't talk about. You know, as women, we're learning if we share that information, we can all do better.
That is true. And I'll tell you, Deborah, you know this. Audience knows this, so I'm going to say it again because I know personally, firsthand, the difference in a caregiving journey of having education and not having the education. Because I was just thinking 25 years ago when I moved in with my mother-in-law, and I can't believe 25 years went by so fast. We didn't know she had Alzheimer's at that time. There wasn't information. I didn't know about sundowning, hallucinations. I didn't know what came with Alzheimer's when my mother-in-law was diagnosed. I'd never even heard of Alzheimer's, and there really wasn't much information about it. Fast forward with Matt, who was diagnosed 2010, there still wasn't a whole lot going on, but as he went further into the journey, more information was becoming available, and I knew what to do if he should hallucinate, and I knew what to do when he did hallucinate. It makes the journey so much easier in a way. Doesn't take away, folks, your grieving when they lose a skill, but it does help you be prepared, and that's so important. I can't say it enough.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The more planning you can do and the more, detaching yourself from the love you feel in order to do the work of caregiving is pretty important. And the more knowledge you have, the easier it is to kind of compartmentalize. Yes, I love this person, and I want to do the work more efficiently so I don't burn out. Because if I'm not here, who else will be?
That's true. And planning is so important. I always say, plan ahead, have a plan A, have a plan B. And one thing I really have noticed in being in a lot of caregiving groups is that people promise their loved one, I will not place you. Folks, don't make that promise, because no one has a crystal ball to know what will happen, because sometimes we do have to place our loved ones because they need more care than what we could give them, or maybe the caregiver gets sick. and can't do it no longer. So I think that, I told Matt, because Matt would say, I don't want you to place me. And I told him straight out, I don't want to, but if it comes to the point you need more care than I could give you, then I have no choice. I have to. And then, of course, he would say he would run away. That's what he'd think.
Well,
go ahead,
we all have a fear of going to that place, as my dad used to call it. He did not get to that place because when I started to care for him, he didn't live very much longer. But he didn't want to go into a nursing home, and toward the end, it wasn't Alzheimer's, but I was beginning to feel that I just could not rise to the occasion anymore because of all of his anxiety and concerns. He needed at least to be in assisted living, and I still had my family to finish raising, so I couldn't take care of him. He didn't want to move into my house, but he really couldn't live by himself. So what I'm trying to look for is look a little bit beyond the individual caregiver situation and look at how our society is operating. Because in many families, it's either too difficult or some families don't want to help. And in fact, that's the complaint when I interview people that I hear the most, is that the family isn't stepping up the way they would hope that they would. So they're alone. And what we need to be thinking about is doing, you probably remember Oprah had the Random Acts of Kindness program, which was so wonderful. But I'm looking for intentional acts of kindness. We have to be more intentional about caregiving and helping each other because there are just too many situations that need our help now. So, too many caregivers living in isolation and developing conditions that contribute to early mortality and so on. And I don't think we're going to continue to function very well if we keep leaving everyone alone. I also some developments which seem positive on the surface about keeping people at home. One in particular really worries me, and that is the so-called hospital at home movement, where a patient is sent home with a lot of advanced technology and testing equipment, and it's up to an unskilled family caregiver to monitor all of this and make sure all this work gets done in addition to everything else they're doing. And this was an effort to avoid hospital costs. So on the one hand, that's a good thing. But on the other hand, we're asking unskilled people to do what a nurse would do or a paramedic would do or a doctor would do in a hospital and expecting everything to go well. And, unfortunately, without the knowledge and the skill, and certainly without the compensation that those people would receive, it's a little difficult from my end to imagine how this is going to end well. So I am concerned about a lot of developments that are meant to save money, but not really looking at the caregiver. So I think we all have to be a little more intentional about what we are asking people to do and how much they can do by themselves.
Absolutely. I know exactly what you're talking about, Deborah. That was in one of the Jersey papers. Mm-hmm. I think not this Sunday. It was the Sunday before. It was either in the Star Ledger or the News Tribune, because I remember reading it. I'm thinking, oh, my goodness, how does someone do all that? How do they expect someone to do all that among everything else? And you're right. I faced abandonment and isolation being a caregiver, and the world got a taste of that with COVID. They didn't like it. So me with my big mouth, they don't like it. And I said, you don't like it? Well, that's what I've been talking about for years, way before COVID, was the abandonment and isolation of the caregiver. And it's very true.
That's why I think these other outlets are so important, because we can't let the subject just drop. There are only 24 hours in the day, and people can only do so much. They do need to sleep and eat themselves as well. So I don't know how they think we can keep loading on tasks and not providing any help. And there's no one in charge of this big picture. It's really up to the caregiver to right the situation, to get things on a better track. But that requires some skills, and I don't know if we're all born with those necessarily. I mean, I've been a time management expert in my life, so I certainly am applying a lot of that to this, but it's a little different in an office from in your personal life from taking care of another. You can't just load on the extra tasks to what you're already doing. It's not that simple. So we have a lot
true.
of work to do. We do.
And I could say this, Deborah. I worked as a nurse, and I was a caregiver. It's totally different being a caregiver. You cannot walk away. You know, when I worked as a nurse, I did my shift, 8-10 hours. I went home. There's no leaving your shift in a way when you are doing it at home. It's totally different. And to the people, and I see such judgment in care groups, I don't understand it. The judgment that other caregivers place on other caregivers just boggled my mind, you know, because people would say, oh, well, you know, your mother took care of you. Why can't you take care of your mom or your dad? And if that mom or dad has dementia, it's a lot. It's totally different. It has nothing to do with honoring your parents. When you are like that sandwich generation, you're raising your kids and you try to take care of a parent. Children can learn skills. Somebody with dementia cannot learn a skill. They're losing their skills. It's such a different situation. So I just want to tell the audience, please don't judge people's decisions unless you are in that situation, because we all have to do what's best for our loved ones and ourselves. And that's not being selfish. That's survival.
It really came as a shock to me sometimes that as a caregiver, I was expected to trade my life to save the other person. And people don't want to look at it that way, but that's exactly what it becomes sometimes when you're trying to work 24/7, both taking care of a person, handling all their personal affairs, their business affairs, and winding things up for them, and all the other things that probably will need to be done. It's more than a 24-hour job, and that's on top of trying to have some quality of life for yourself, which you both need and deserve. But other people don't seem to recognize what's happening there. And I've read that while 24/7 caregivers are most at risk for early mortality, and it's not that they're going to have a heart attack tomorrow, but the conditions are building. It turns out if you work only 15 to 20 hours a week on caregiving, you might be able to report feelings of satisfaction, which doesn't mean you aren't working too hard, but it does give you some leeway to still have some of your own life.
Yes. When I look back, Deborah, honestly, and I look back at the stress, and I worked and taking care of Matt, it was very stressful. I'm very fortunate I'm sitting here talking to you today. Really, I'm very grateful to be alive and well for what I went through. I am. I'm just very grateful. Can you tell us about your new book? Sounds so interesting. How did you come up with that title? And what is your book about?
Oh, thank you. Well, when I wrote The Rational Caregiver, which was an introduction to the framework I would use for coaching people to, first of all, become aware of their own situation before they even look at someone else's in terms of their health and well-being and finances and so on, and then to become really aware of what the other person's going to face and what the needs for caregiving are going to be before they make that decision to say yes. And I think it's a decision. Often we feel pressed or obligated or guilty, so we take it on without really thinking about what it means. And that's where people already start to get into trouble. So in that first book, The Rational Caregiver, I went into that framework a bit. And in the second book, I'm going into some more detail about the critical skills that you need to remain empowered if you do agree to take it on. And I guess I would highlight delegation skills, learning to involve other people in the process, that's the share giving, and really fierce time management because you can't get it back. And also to communicate from a position of strength. Do not give away your power. And I came to that because in working on a number of my projects, I realized that I had been a caregiver at a very early age. And a literal situation came up where I had won a beauty crown at 3 years old. And I saw that another person was crying. And so I gave her the crown. And everyone was mad at me. Why are you giving up something? It's yours, and that kind of thing. And finally, when I stopped crying enough to tell my dad that the other woman had seemed unhappy, so I didn't want her to be unhappy, so I gave her my crown. And that story now in my adult years has cut two ways. One is about the caring part of me, which I think always overrides the rest of me. And the other, though, is a part about how you really still have that empowerment, even if you give away the symbol of it, and you can get it back. And what I think happens in a caring situation for a family member, most of us do it because of love. There may be some duty or responsibility mixed in there, but because we do it from that angle first, we forget about how to manage our lives and their lives. So I want to restore that management piece of it and give people the skills that they may not already have. Some people are not good delegators or time managers. That's something that you can learn to do. And it doesn't get you better loved or liked to do those things, but it's how to save your own life. So That's what the second book is about, is preserving the quality of life that you want by being a little bit more fierce about the management aspect of being a caregiver. And there's plenty of that to go around. You won't run out of things to manage. But a lot of people just throw in the towel and say, well, I love this person, so I'll just keep doing things all day and all night if that's what it takes. And that's a wrong-headed approach to it if you want to live longer. So I'm really concerned about that, and that's the cause for both the book and the podcast. And the idea of share giving, meaning our whole global society needs to be more invested in taking care of the others. Could I tell you a story? I don't think I mentioned this the last time, but it's fascinating to me. Apparently, according to this story, the anthropologist Margaret Mead was once asked what she thought was the first sign of civilization. And according to the story, she said that a healed femur bone in some archaeological site was the first sign, and that was about 17,000 years ago. And she said probably there were earlier signs, but this to her said civilization, because you can't walk with a broken femur. So other people had to help this person. Now, it turns out that the story is not true. She never said that. Maybe somebody did, but she didn't. And yet, I see this story cited all the time as evidence of caring as the earliest sign of civilization. So it's something, I think, embedded in the human psyche, the human mind, that we need to do it and we need to have it for ourselves. And yet we seem to be turning away in our busy world from those units that used to care for each other. So that's where I came up with share giving, that we really all have to be invested in that process.
Oh, I love that. That is so true. I just was talking to a guest last week, and, about nourishing your soul, and especially for, anyone, but as a caregiver, we have to take care of ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with, delegating tasks to other people. And I know sometimes it's really hard to ask for help. I know it was hard for me to ask for help. And, you think that you're doing yourself or your loved one a favor by being this martyr, and you're not. Because what happens is you're getting stressed, so, your body is suffering from the effects of that, and then you become resentful. And that's not good either. And I just had to tell the audience this. You know what? If you're a caregiver, you really need to listen to Dr. Deborah Greenhut because she knows what she's talking about. She was a caregiver. And to have this valuable information at your fingertips is a way to survive caregiving. And, people can survive and thrive during caregiving. I did. And it's a mindset. It's taking care of yourself. And folks, I'm a Jersey girl, so I'm going to be blunt here. You have to take care of yourself if you want to enjoy life after caregiving. And I said this before, and I'll keep saying it. Self-care is a matter of your life and death, literally. If you want to enjoy life during your loved one's journey and after caregiving, because, Deborah, I have seen so many people in various groups get sick or die after caregiving. It's sad. And we have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
What was that?
I was going to say about 20% of people between the ages of 45 and 65 are caregivers, and they are probably most at risk for declining health because of that situation. So I did put my third chapter is about self-care in this new book because I think it is so important. I'm so glad that you mentioned that.
Yes, it is extremely important. And I know it's hard to balance, Deborah. And I know I felt very conflicted when leaving that and recharging my batteries. Yeah. But I had to recharge my batteries so I could be a better caregiver, because if I didn't get sleep, I was a witchy woman. You don't want to be around me. And that isn't good. And I think especially women, Deborah, as women, we're always trained, especially our generation, right, the baby boomers, is to put everyone else first. I think that's been ingrained in us. So it's hard to put ourselves first. It's very difficult because you have to flip your programming of what you were taught. But finally, at the age of 66, almost 67, I'm starting to put myself first and to care for my body. And I am still a caregiver to my son, but not like it was for Matt. It's a totally different type of caregiving, but I'm still a caregiver. And I do need to take care of myself, so I'm around for my son.
Yeah, I like that. You made a great distinction before. Certainly, as parents or mothers, in the case of women, obviously, we learn to absorb that schedule of someone else's demand. But as you say, children are still learning. Often adults are diminishing in their capabilities. So typically the biology of caregiving is that just as you finish raising your children, for the most part, you're suddenly caring for your parents if you're in that sandwich position. And so it never stops. There's no moment where you can simply care for yourself unless there's some tragedy involved. It's a kind of a heartless biology, I think, of the situation. But we have to face that and start doing proactive things to prevent ourselves from being diminished by caregiving. Otherwise, even if we live longer, our quality of life is not going to be good because it's going to be preoccupied with health care.
Yes, and folks, I'm telling you the truth. I have seen it over and over again of people dying after caregiving, and they don't even get to enjoy life. And it's because they didn't take care of themselves during caregiving, or the caregiver dies during caregiving. And, I don't mean to be morbid, but, death is a part of life, and we have to start having these conversations. We have to learn to take care of ourselves as caregivers to survive. And everyone's journey is different. My husband's was 10 years. I took care of my mother-in-law at home for 5 years. Then she lived about 2.5 years in a nursing home. But it's different for everyone. And this is such an important topic, and I don't think it can be repeated enough. I wish there was Deborah Greenhut 10 years ago or more, giving out this information. I wish there were people talking about their journeys, sharing, so that you know you're not alone. This is so important, and that's why that's one of the reasons why I do my show, is because I want people to know about resources like you, Deborah. I want them to know that there's help out there for them to have a better quality of life. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I wish that I knew about what to do in my caregiving days. It's really important. And I always say, Deborah, that me personally, I like to have a resource who's lived through it. And you have lived through caregiving. You know what it's like. And I think people who have done it make the best resources, in my opinion, because they understand.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad to be here for you, and I'm also glad to hear what you have to say, because every experience I listen to enriches my understanding of what the process is like for people. Yes,
learning. You know what, this is 2024. In 2014, I went online to Facebook, and I joined so many Facebook support groups because I was alone for so long and not having any support at all. I was hungry for support and knowledge. I learned a lot from other caregivers, and you can learn from other caregivers. That's why it's important to share our stories. I've said this 7 years ago. We need to share our stories. People who have any kind of dementia, share your story. We need to know what you're going through, what you're experiencing. And just as we want to hear what other caregivers are experiencing, we learn from each other. And you know what, Deborah, I think, especially in this day and age of such vile hatred going on with people, we need to bring back our humanity. We need to love up on each other and help our fellow man. That's what we're put on this earth for, is to help each other, not be hateful. But I won't get on that soapbox. That's
it's part of the picture, I think. Caregiving is not going to survive without people loving up on each other, as you say, certainly. And certainly caregivers give a lot of love to the people they take care of. And why shouldn't they be as deserving of care and love themselves? We can't keep taking people for granted, or there isn't going to be someone around when you need them. And I guess it was the late Rosalind Carter, former First Lady, who founded a caregiving institute, who said that sooner or later, and I'm paraphrasing here, sooner or later, all of us are either going to be or need a caregiver. No one is going to get out alive without that. So
True.
We really ought to face how fundamental that is to human existence and civilization, and we need to do something about it now.
Oh, absolutely. I love that when I saw that quote from Rosalind Carter, I said, well, how true is that? In my own life, I've been a caregiver. I'm going to eventually probably need one, unless I die in my sleep. My son was a caregiver at age 15, 16, when we moved in with his grandmother. He has to care for his dad. So, and then he needs a caregiver, so that's me. So there's that circle right there. And you're going to find more and more young people are being caregivers as people are getting diagnosed with one disease. If it's not Alzheimer's, it could be Parkinson's, it could be something else, where young people are caregivers.
It's close to, I think I read recently, it's 18% of younger people who are now caregivers to someone in their families. So the whole multi-generational family may be restarting just out of need, that parents who are working can't stay home to care for grandma. So the children, or the younger adult children, are taking care of their grandparents now, and sometimes their parents. So we're not going to end this problem by pretending it doesn't exist, because it does.
It sure does. And Dr. Deborah Greenhut, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. You're very busy, and I wish you the best. on your book and on your podcast? And where can people find the information when your podcast will be starting and where they could purchase your book or when it will be out?
Okay, my book's available now on Amazon. So you can search for my name there, and all the books should come up. But The Caregiver and the Crown is the most recent. And my website is a good place to look for information about me generally. That's www.deborahgreenhut.com. And I'm expecting the podcast to launch toward the end of this month, September. When we're talking, might be early October. So look for it around then, and it will be available any place you can obtain a podcast.
I am so excited. Folks, I can only give us so much information about a guest. I really encourage everyone to go on my guest website for the information. Dr. Deborah Greenhut is a valuable resource. She has a lot of information on her website. You could get samples of her books. You could hear her talk. It's phenomenal. You are phenomenal, Dr. Deborah Greenhut. Just a wealth of information and resource, and I wish you the best. And I will have to listen to your show. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, why do you promote other podcasts? Because I believe in supporting other people, folks. I don't have all the answers. We need as much information out there as possible, and I want to share it. I want people to know about Dr. Deborah Greenhut because I sure wish I knew about Dr. Deborah Greenhut a few years ago. We need to support each other, and that's part of, you know, sharing, giving. It's also sharing information that we know about. So I want to thank you, Dr. Deborah Greenhut, for writing your books and all that you do to help caregivers and their families. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Betsy. I really appreciated this chance to share. I hope you have a wonderful week.
Thank you. You too. Folks, all the information about Dr. Deborah Greenhut will be on the blog that Jeannie White writes, and Jeannie White's the station manager, produces the show. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Passion World Talk Radio Network, makes this all possible. And again, I thank you for listening and sharing and subscribing. And please subscribe, as I said earlier, on where you can find me. And I want to help as many people as possible, and I can only do it if you help me. So please tell your friends about Chatting with Betsy, because I have phenomenal guests on who can help you have a better quality of life. And if you're a caregiver, make your caregiving journey a little easier. And if you're not already a caregiver, believe me, you will be someday, as Deborah said. And so plan ahead. Know about it now. Get the information now. And I'm here for the resource to help you. That's why I do the show. And I want to thank you all for your support. And if you are looking for a support group, I have hashtag Kick Alzheimer's Ass Movement on Facebook. And you can follow me on Facebook, Betsy E. Wurzel, Wurzel. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you can be anything, please be kind, shine your light bright, because we need it now more than ever before. This is Betsy Wurzel. You're a host of Chatting with Betsy on Passion World Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Chat with you later. Bye-bye now.